Interviews and insights with the biggest names in Canadian baseball. This is the CBN Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. If you've been following the Canadian Baseball Network or myself on Twitter, you'll know that we have a very special guest today. He's a two-time manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, managed the team during those epic playoff runs in 2015 and 2016. Our guest today is John Gibbons.
You know, Matt, we've had some cool guests on here, right? And some really cool people in Canadian baseball. John Gibbons is a real highlight today. Really looking forward to this one. This is going to be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to touch on his career in Toronto, obviously the level of excellence with José Bautista this past weekend, the 2015, 2016 playoff run, a little bit what he's up to with this podcast and the new book. So let's get to it. All right, we are thrilled to welcome two-time Blue Jays manager John Gibbons to the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. John, how's it going?
Doing good. Just back down in Texas. Spent 5 days up in Toronto, for Bautista's ceremony. Loved it. It brought back some great memories, and they did a tremendous job putting that thing on.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's kind of where I wanted to go first. I know it's been talked about a lot, but you obviously were on the field for that ceremony. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the emotion of it. Obviously, you saw Jose get emotional. I had a friend whose father was there who said he was in tears. What kind of emotions did that kind of spur up for you, remembering his career and your time with him?
Well, first of all, I had been back there. I've been back there one other time since 2018, right? Since I, parted ways with him, fired, quit, whatever you want to call it. So, Toronto became such a big part of my home. I was there for probably about 15 years, 10 as a manager, 5 as a coach. So I spent a lot of my life there, and then. We finally, after some tough years, we finally got to the top where we became relevant again. So now the emotion of that and the good feeling of that took over, right? Then it went the other direction, and then I was out, right? My guys left, Anthopoulos and Beast and those guys, and so there was a lot of emotion there to begin with, but I fell in love with that place, and then so the first time to go back, and then of course to celebrate one of the the all-time greats and a guy that I spent many years with, José Bautista, it brought back a lot of good feelings, and then I got an incredible reception that more than I expected or deserved, and so when I was walking out there to my chair, I thought I got a little choked up, and but it was it brought back a lot of great memories and a chance to see some of the other guys I coached along with Jose, and it was basically like a reunion. It was pretty cool.
So tell us something about Jose that maybe the average fan watching on TV might not know. What kind of person he is behind the scenes in the clubhouse, that sort of thing?
He's really got a big heart. He's a sensitive guy. You probably wouldn't know that. He's a complicated dude, right? He emotional, stubborn. He's got his thoughts and beliefs, and he sticks by them, and he defends them. He's very, very intelligent. He's he'd be a good politician someday, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but because if he believes that he's going to get his point across, and he's great in the community. He does a lot of charity type stuff that goes on. People don't notice that, right? Or they don't hear about it. Put it that way, because he doesn't advertise it. He's really the complete dude, right? Like I said, he's complicated because he can rub people the wrong way on the outside. If he's with your team, it's a little bit different, right? But and he's an emotional. He's the umpires all hated him, but he was right most of the time. So. Yeah, so that's what I mean by complicated. But he's a special guy, and he's as far as baseball fans, what they care about, he was a tremendous player, and that's what they worry about.
Of course, yeah. So you mentioned the Eurovation that you got. You arrived as manager the first time, I believe, in 2014 or 2004. Sorry, not 2014, 2004. Right. How long did it take you to realize that coming to Toronto is a different animal, representing essentially all of Canada?
Well, you know what? Because I went there in 2002 as a coach under JP Richard. He had taken over as a general manager, and he was an old roommate of mine. We played professional ball together with the Met system. And I known Canada a little bit when I was a young kid. I played my first Little League game up there. My dad was in the U.S. military Air Force, and they had a base up in Goose Bay, Labrador. And then so that was my exposure to it. I mean, I was young, but hey, I'd been there, done that, I guess you could say. And we met some people on the line. My parents had some friends that they had met that they even kept in touch with. So, I knew what kind of people were up there, put it that way. But it's still a foreign country if you're living down in the U.S. And we're connected, but you know what I mean. But when I got there, it was like, the more I'm around, people, it's like, gosh, I can't say they're all a lot like most Americans. I could say most Texans, put it that way. That's a compliment to both sides, right?
Thanks for clarifying that.
But you know what? Hey, they, Canadians are hardworking people. They're honest, right? They like their beer. That's for sure. But they're just good. They're just good quality people. The majority of them. Yeah, we got idiots everywhere, but there's that's how I would describe Canadians. And if you give them a good effort, and you know what, they'll love you, right?
Is that something that the players know too? Is that something that's not necessarily discussed, but something that's felt in the clubhouse, that this is you're not just playing for a city or even a state, you're playing for an entire country?
Oh yeah, and you know what, I had I have never managed a player or known of one that when he left there, because there's some guys that when they go to Toronto, think, well, it's a foreign country, and the big thing is customs, right? That's not really that big a deal. But you get double tax, whatever. I don't know, whatever. I have never come across one who, when their playing days were over there, did not love it, did not fall in love with the place. And I mean, it's amazing because some people at first they go, but that everybody loves it, and even the guys that I talked with, like with Smokey and Devin Travis and Ryan Goins the other day. And every one of them missed this place, because you're treated so well to begin with. It's a Toronto and all Canada's a safe place. Not used to that in the States, right? And people care. It's legit. So everybody loves that place up there, and I understand why. But but for the longest time, as far as knowing you asked about how Canada caught fire, right? Not just Toronto, but we were irrelevant, right, until 2015. But everybody always told me, they said, listen, if the team's any good and you're in it, the end of August, September, and you're in the pennant race, watch what happens, right? I said, okay, but all right, whatever, right? But we were never in it, and then I got whacked my first go round, and then eventually came back, and even that didn't start off that good, right?
Yeah, I kind of think back on it, just from my perspective. There's a couple moments in franchise history that kind of define the organization. Obviously, the World Series in 92, 93, but I really think those 2015, 2016 seasons did that for a new generation of baseball players. So going back to that 2015, 2016 season, and given that we just passed the trade deadline here, obviously Alex Anthopoulos goes out and gets Troy Tulowitzki, David Price. What does that do for a clubhouse you guys, I think, were 52 and 51 at that time. But obviously getting those reinforcements, what does that do for the players in the clubhouse?
Oh, it's huge, right? Especially to the extent he went, right? Bringing, I mean, it wasn't just one or two guys, man. We brought in a handful that were impact guys. But I'll give you the perfect example. The year before, we were almost had the identical record, and we were a game or two maybe out of the wild card. We were playing down in Houston at the trade deadline. I can remember it well. We didn't do anything. Alex had no money left, right? Because one of the big complaints up there was Rogers would never give him any money. I think everybody cried. Every baseball operation, cries that wherever they go, right? But that was kind of the fact right there. He had maxed out on what he was allowed to use, right? Because until teams start winning, I don't blame owners they can be a little bit conservative with that money. Why would they just don't want to throw it away, right? So anyway, we didn't make one move, I don't think it was. And so then Bautista, José always shows up, And Casey Jansen, our closer, did interviews down there in Houston, and we're basically complaining about we didn't do a thing, blah, blah, blah. We were, a game or two, whatever it was, at the wild card. Okay. Nothing. Alex couldn't do anything. He had no money, right? And he really couldn't pull off a trade that was, that would have done much for us. Okay. So going into the 15th season, of course, we go out and get Donaldson and then Russell Martin. But we're the best offensive team in the league, and we could pitch. We were solid pitching, but we were terrible defensively. We Reyes at shortstop had lost his range. We were playing Colabello and Danny Valencia in left field, and they're infielders, and balls were dropping everywhere. So it just shows you, if you're going to win anything, you got to play some defense. So anyway, what he did is he saved like I don't know, million, maybe 2 million, million and a half, whatever. It sounds like it's no money, right? And it kept in his back pocket for that year for the trade deadline. And so we got to okay, here it is. Now that's what allowed him to get David Price. I think Dave had on, I don't know, whatever he had left on his contract prorated the final couple of months from Detroit. That's what that money covered. And then Tulowitzki and Jose Reyes were basically a wash in their contracts. And then of course, there's a couple other guys that weren't a big deal as far as that the money end of it. So that's how it all happened. Otherwise, if he's got no money left, Price probably doesn't show up. So and then there was a negative feeling in 14. We didn't do anything. Now there's a wow. You could just feel it, right? And then it was like a light switch. It wasn't like everybody's got to get to know each other, and then hopefully we play good. It was like bam, right? I remember Price making that his first start against, I think it was against the Twins, some day game, and he put on a show, and then. And Tulowitzki was the key guy to me. We had him on the field because his defense, he cleaned up our defense so much, and that made all the difference in the world. And so that, yes, to answer your question, if you don't make any moves, yeah, they question it. Whether and you can't always players and coaches always think, what, you can get whatever you want, just go out and get it, right? It doesn't work that way, obviously, right? But we think it does. But it's like, wow, okay, now, all right, boys in the clubhouse, let's go. We did our part. Now it's hey, put your money where your mouth is. In 14, zip it, let's go. And then, but we caught fire, and just cleaning up that defense and adding a top-notch pitcher, it really we exploded.
That's interesting insight, because if you guys think that you can go out and do those sort of things, if fans think like it should be like a video game, you just trade for, I want that guy, let's go trade for him. But obviously,
I will tell you this, I mean, the ownership up there, one of the wealthiest owners in baseball. So there's money somewhere, but but they got shareholders. They got to now maybe the guy in New York with the Mets Cohen, he wouldn't care, but
How much of this current team do you watch?
Quite a bit, yeah.
My next question is actually about Tulowitzki, because when he was traded from Colorado to Toronto, there are some reports out there that he didn't necessarily want to leave Colorado. It wasn't anything against Toronto, but it was, the way the whole thing was handled. And you kind of saw, Whit Merrifield last year struggle a little bit, making the transition to a new team. You're seeing it now with Paul DeYoung a little bit. How as a manager, do you handle those situations and try to integrate those guys as quickly as possible, especially when you're in a playoff race?
Well, yeah, you know what? You'll see it quite a bit. Not when guys get traded, especially mid-season, but whether it might be in the off-season, or guys sign big free agent contracts. Sometimes that added pressure they put on themselves to justify it, right? Or with the DeYoung right now is going to a new place in the middle of the season. The shortstop goes down. He wants to. He's probably trying a little bit too hard. That's kind of what happens. So it's usually the second, third years, the guys take off, they become who they normally are, But like you said, in Tulowitzki's case, I think what happened with Troy was they had told him, hey, if we're going to do anything, we'll keep you abreast of what we're doing, let you sign off on all. And then they didn't do it. That's what chapped him, right? That's my understanding of it. And I understand it. But, he grew to love that place too, And, as a matter of fact, I think during the offseason, Bo Bichette spent some time with him. Of course, Bo's dad played with him, Colorado, because there's not a better fundamentally sound shortstop than Troy Tulowitzki was. And I think that's helped Bo a little bit this year.
So he was actually, Tulowitzki was a coach at the University of Texas. Did you ever get a chance to meet up with them and, kind of reminisce on the 2015, 2016 seasons?
Yeah, you know what? Because a couple of years ago, I was working for the Atlanta Braves, kind of scouting. I did some amateur scouting and some other things. So I went up there to watch a couple of players, and I got to go down the field there and see him. Met his other coaches, but yeah, he was volunteering up there. He wasn't getting paid a dime. He bought a house in Austin, but then something happened where, because he didn't have his degree, I don't think they said, well, you can't do that job. So he left for a year last year, but they brought him back to do something. But anyway, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, we went. It's good to see old Troy. He did wonders for that team up there. He'd be a fantastic manager, head coach, anything, because you know what, he's in tune with the game. He was a leader on the field, talking baseball, and it makes sense. Some guys will give you this, and it's like, really? Okay. But Troy, he would be tremendous if that's what he wanted to do.
I got one for you here, John. You mentioned you were with the Braves briefly scouting. In 2021, you were Bob Elliott reported that you actually were awarded a World Series ring because you were scouting with the Braves, and you actually scouted the Astros leading up to the World Series where they met. Tell us a little bit kind of about that experience and just how much that World Series ring obviously meant to you.
Well, I didn't do a whole heck of a lot to earn it, I tell you that, but no, you know what? Well, Alex, what normally happens with managers and their old general managers, and they usually, if they've been doing it for any length of time, they usually bring them on and they put the title on them, special assignment, right? And they'll send them out to do whatever. It might be go look at this high school kid or that we may draft, or go look at the guys in our minor leagues, or go to a big league game and look at this guy because we may try to trade for him. So they brought me on my first year. I was out scouting colleges and stuff like that. Then COVID hit, right? So it shut everything down. So I was at it probably about a month, and that was it. And then of course, in the following years, the following year, it took a while to get things ramped up. So, but the highlight of that year was I scouted the Astros and the Red Sox in that series before the World Series, just in case Atlanta did get there. And at the time of my life with John Sherholtz Jr., his dad's was the architect of all those great Atlanta Braves team. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's a sharp kid too. And I really enjoyed that, and then, of course they went on to win it. They caught fire and what have you. And then what happened is I was going back and I was doing the same thing the following year. But then, I had a book that came out, and then the guys that put the book together and all that said, thought the brilliant idea, like you guys, why don't you do a podcast, right? So anyway, so I thought, yeah, why don't I try that? Because I really wasn't a whole lot I was doing, with scouting and things like that. It was kind of I wanted to do more, right? So I told Alex, that I was going to do a podcast, and the fact that I'm talking about baseball and other organizations, other players like that, we felt it was best I, moved on. So I resigned. So it wasn't, that came to an end last September or whatever. So, so now here I'm in the podcast business like you guys, and loving every minute of it. But, Alex has been, is a good friend. He gave him a second chance there, him and Bautista. That doesn't happen too often. If you win a championship, like when when I got fired the first time, Cito Gaster replaced me, right? So they won 2 World Series, right? So when I go back, if you don't have some hardware, people are going, what are you doing? That. And I even told Alex, I said, dude, hey, you're crazy, man. You're trying to get yourself fired? I said, this isn't going to go over very well. He said, let me worry about that. And I said, not only that, Beeston's not going to go for it. He goes, let me handle that. And sure enough, Beeston signed off on it. And that's how it all happened. But, well, I'm glad it did.
It's funny you mentioned the podcast and the book, Gibby, Tales of a Baseball Lifer, I believe is the name of it. The Gibby Show is your podcast. So this was actually a question that someone sent me on Twitter. Writing a book and doing a podcast often opens up a little bit of vulnerability. Social media obviously is quite the thing with both critics and people praising you. So what kind of made you want to get into that, and how? And I guess a side question to that is, how do players manage the world of social media and fans that can be super intense at times?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't want to get into it. That was never my intent. Even the book, my last day there in 2018, there's 3 or 4 reporters that I would become all the reporters around. I became really good friends with them. We didn't always agree. They didn't not like they took care of me or anything. but we, you know, had mutual respect and just good people, right? And 3 or 4 of them said to me, and I was leaving that day, if you ever write a book, I want to write it. I'm going, okay, yeah, whatever. Never even crossed my mind. So anyway, a couple of years went by, and then COVID hit. And this old friend of mine who had written a book, and he used ECW Press up there in Toronto, kind of put it together. And then the guy that wrote his book, he ended up writing mine. So, but that was never the intention. But it was kind of one of those things. Well, there's not much going on here. Let's give it a try, right? But okay, then they said, okay, well, if that book's gonna come out, you need to be on social media. I go, oh gosh, I'm almost 60 years old. Come on, you really? So that's kind of how all that started. It wasn't like, gosh, I gotta get out there in the world, man, be seen, you know, because I was happy disappearing, you know. And so I had my kids kind of had to show me us, you know, how you function in this world. So I throw stuff out there every now and it's funny. It's almost the stupider, the better, you know, people like it more when you say the stupider, right?
It's a weird place out there. Social media. Twitter is the wild west of the world, I think.
Oh yeah. So anyway, the same guys in the Cape. So let's do that podcast, right? Of course, then you need social media to advertise it and all that. And people have been pretty good to me. I don't necessarily get in and read all that. Occasionally, you'll get some jerk, man. I'll just block him or cut him off, you know. And so.
You heard it here first. John Gibbons blocking people on Twitter.
but the other part of your question, you asked about the players. It can be a nightmare, especially I imagine this day and age, but when I was finishing up there and that was always the thing, people in the front office, we tell them, you got to be careful, what have you, and because this is going to turn into, and I don't know if anybody on our team specifically had any problems with it, but you can see guys around the league, next thing you know, they're deleting it, but you know what? It's oh gosh, it's stuff that happened 10 years before, and now they're still marked people, but yeah, it can be dangerous. That's kind of like you said, that's the world we live in, and this the so-called makes your brand, right? And we're brand. But you have to be careful because and that's why I kind of try to limit what I do, and yeah, now that I'm older, I could blame it on. I could tell them I'm like Joe Biden, man. I don't remember what I said.
So you have a built-in excuse now, which that's
exactly.
Good. So I want to jump back to that playoff run a little bit, and obviously the bat flips, what everyone talks about is what Jose is known for, the mural that's going up in Toronto. But I want to talk about something that happened before that. So it was the 7th inning. Aaron Sanchez on the mound, Russell Martin behind the plate, Shin-Shu Chu in the box. Martin throws the ball off of Chu's bat. Roughneck Odor comes in and scores, takes the lead. What were you thinking when that happened? I remember I followed baseball my entire. I had no idea what was going on. What were you thinking when that initially happened?
Exactly the same thing you were. I don't know what the heck's going on. Well, at first, be honest, I can never remember seeing that happen. And Dale Scott, the home plate umpire, threw his hands up, dead ball, right? So that's naturally what I thought, right? I thought it's a dead ball. But gosh, my mind's going. It wasn't even like we're in trouble. It's like, that's a dead ball and so I went out there, and the umpires, I don't think really knew it because it's rare. I mean, you just don't see that happen, right? And of course, Bannister's on the other side, like he's Joe Rulebook, So then they ended up figuring it out. They ended up getting it right, obviously, and but that place was going nuts, man. If we don't come back and win that game. Nobody might have got out of that stadium alive,
So what was the bat flip like, in the dugout specifically? Obviously, if you're watching at home, the stadium looked like it was going to come down. In the dugout, what was that like when, as soon as you made contact with that ball, take me into the dugout?
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, that inning setup, that just shows you, you always hear about how loud that place is, especially when the roof's closed. The place shakes, man. There's nothing like it. And the Texas Rangers, they were a lot like us, They had a really ball club powerhouses, and their whole infield was almost Gold Glove winners, But the pressure of that moment, they were making errors, hearing the ball, dropping balls, throwing balls away. It's like, there's some the baseball gods and the Torontonians and the Canadians all across that country, man, we're breathing down their neck, right? So but things just lined up, and then even the ball like Donaldson hit before Bautista, Odor's going back and he gets his feet crossed up, and normally he makes that play. And so anyway, but then it was almost like this is the way it was supposed to be. Bautista, the face of the franchise. He'd been there during the lean times. He's kind of, in a lot of ways, he's one of the villains in the league outside of Canada, right? And sure enough, it couldn't have happened to a more perfect guy. I tell people all the time, if any other guy had hit that home run on that team or years past and flipped the bat, it just wouldn't have had the magnitude that I don't think that José had. There's just something about it supposed to be that guy.
Yeah,
right?
It was just so authentic at the time. You could tell it was not planned in that moment, and it was just that's what kind of made it so amazing, I think, for fans.
Yeah, but I was sitting in that dugout, right? I saw him hit it, right? Of course, I think I had my some information. I'm trying to figure. You as a manager, you're sitting there tracking the next inning, and you're trying to map out how you're going to run the game if things fall in place, right? So I see the hit. Now I'm watching the ball. I think like most people, right? So I didn't even see the bat flip. I'm just going, go get out. And then of course, it's like, and then gosh, that place just erupted, and then I mean it's to be fair, it's so hard to really describe it, the feeling, because I will tell you this, because that was my first major league playoff experience, right? First round that I've ever been in. And so things are happening fast, man. You just feel the pressure, and that's the I'm pretty good at pushing that off to the side. But this is a winner take all game, so it's seventh inning. It's like we ain't got a whole lot of time here, boys. We dropped the first two at home. Everybody's like, wow. But I was playing for the 86 Mets when they lost the first two games at home against the Red Sox and went on to win that. So I kind of knew that. But we also, these guys, when we were down 2 games, went down to Texas, you'd have never known it, man. There was just something different about this group of guys. So anyway, everything's just kind of in a tunnel, right? You hear all that noise, but it's more like a roar, and you feel it shake. And I can only speak for what I was going through. And all right, how are we going to get through the rest of this game? All right, boys, we just took the lead, but we got we got some time left here too. Now we got to close this thing out. And of course, yeah. And then Osuna comes in and does it, but. I really believe that was meant to be. We were too good a team to bow out. They were a good team too. I mean, they could very easily won it. But I think the good bad guys won it. Put it that way. We were the good guys, but throughout the baseball, we were the bad guys.
Baseball, a carnival, and an important cause make for a great day. The Baseball Zone, in collaboration with ALS Double Play, is hosting the first annual baseball carnival, Strikeout ALS. Join their family-friendly event that'll include carnival games, food and vendors, baseball activities and competitions, helping to support an important cause, a live podcast, and entertainment. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday, September 9th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Baseball Zone, located at 1081 Breivik Place, Mississauga, Ontario. Register online at thebaseballzone.ca. Tickets will also be available at the door. All proceeds from the tickets will go to support ALS research. Let's strike out ALS. Now back to the interview. Watching the game now, do you watch a lot of games from around Major League Baseball or mainly just Jays?
Yeah, more so Blue Jays. And then I catch, the MLB network every morning to watch the highlights and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask because as a former catcher, obviously I'm manager, is there a catcher out there playing in the bigs right now that he's like your favorite catcher to watch? Do you have a favorite catcher to watch? Because the way they go about, like, who is that person for you? Are there a few of them in the game?
Yeah. You know what? Obviously I'm a Realmuto fan. He's known as one of the best. He's, one of the big reasons, not only because he's really good and he's a good defender and he gets some big hits and he plays every stinking day, and he's probably my favorite. Danny Jansen, Danny broke into the big leagues my last year there. I'm a huge fan of Danny Jansen. To be honest with you, I wish he'd play every day, but Kirky's good too. That's the thing. They're a little bit spoiled right there. And Danny's been a little injury prone lately. But I think if he played all the time, he'd put up tremendous numbers, right? And when he's in there, the team wins. That's all I can tell you. But there's the kid out with the Dodgers is really good. The thing is, you get a lot of times I drew a blank. The the Atlanta Braves. They picked him up from Oakland.
Sean Murphy.
Murphy, right? Yeah, he's come over there and he fit in really well. And I can remember when I told you I was working with Anthopoulos, he told me to go to Atlanta, the AAA team, watch Contreras catch, because he was down in AAA, and give him my thoughts on that. Well, I'm not going to tell whether if I was positive or negative, because if Alex believed me, he'd end up trading him. So I don't know. You figure it out. No, but obviously we're not going to trade the kid unless you're going to get a guy like Murphy. So there's really a lot of good ones out there that. What I do hate though? I hate seeing these guys on their knee all game long. I was watching. Where was it? The game the other night? There was a highlight. It was Tampa. Tampa Bay Rays, right? They were up by 3 runs in the 9th inning, and who came back on them? Somebody came back and tied it. Maybe it was Cleveland. 3 wild pitches, but just bounce the ball. The guy catcher's on his knees, wild pitch. I don't know. You'll see a lot of them where they'll make some great plays or they'll glove it. And for some reason, it's just they say, well, they get the lower pitches called better. Well, okay, well, if it balances out, I get all that. But you get me to tell me Johnny Bench, Gary Carter, Carlton Fisk, all those great Hall of Famers, right? They didn't get down on their knee, right? Unless the guy wasn't on base. They had no problem getting that low strike called. They cut some pretty good pitching staff. So, that's kind of one of those things that got hot in analytics, and they stuck with it. But because it's funny, I got to tell you a quick story here. That when I went to watch our AAA team in Atlanta, of course the Braves, Contreras was on his knee and the other team, and I'd seen a little bit of it, but I didn't realize it was everybody was doing in baseball, right? So I called Alex and I said, "Gosh, these guys are on their knees, Bob," and he's kind of like, "Well, that's what we do now." I'm going. And it's funny in that particular game, there was a guy on third base, and the catcher was on his knee. He couldn't move very far. Ball gets by, and a go-ahead run scores. I'm going, okay. Well, I get it. But when there's a guy on third base, well, how about Anyway, I don't know what the trade-off is, but all you got to do is you lose a game one time, and
I don't think you're the only one that feels that way. I've heard that quite a bit from quite
Have
a few.
you?
Yeah, the one knee thing seems to be a hot button topic among catchers. So, but I want to jump back. We mentioned Bob already, and he might kill me for bringing his name up into this. But tell me a little bit of what it was like tell me a little bit about what it was like to interact with him. And if I remember correctly, you might have been the one that let it slip at a post game press conference about him retiring. Am I correct in saying that?
I might have, but I tell you what, he blew the secret when I got the job the second time, and I didn't. But the thing is, I didn't tell him, "Hey, I got this. You can't say anything." He ended up calling my home. My wife answered, and I was gone. I was in Toronto, right? I don't know. Bobby's good at that stuff, man. He should have been a detective on the police force, right? But my wife at the time didn't tell him I was up in Toronto, doing a press conference, right? But he was put two and two together, and I think that's how it first got out. It wasn't like it was, it wasn't like, all right, everybody's all excited, Gibbons is coming back, and it's like, I'm sure there's like, oh, what are we doing? People were going, that can't be true. What the heck, were we trying to win or not? But but Bobby is a special guy, and of course, he's always got his Diet Coke. Was it Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi?
Diet Coke every
Coke.
time.
Oh my!
I don't know
God.
if I've ever seen him walking around without one.
No, exactly. And of course, a lot of time he had his dip in too. Just like me. So, but he really is. I think he's done more for Canadian baseball. He's always put that at the center of everything he does, and he really cares about the game. He's just a good baseball guy, and very knowledgeable baseball man. And we just sit around, and you guys know, a great storyteller, right? You get it, but crying loud, you get him rambling though, man. If you have any place to go, forget it. You ain't getting there, So he's a special guy, one of my great friends. He wasn't one of the guys though that said, if you write a book, I want to write it.
He has a couple books. I guess he just passed on yours. So I'll have to ask
maybe,
him about
exactly. He didn't think mine would sell much. I'm not sure how it's doing anyway, so he might have been right.
So last question for you, John. Since we have a former manager sitting in the chair across from us, give us your outlook on this team and on this current Blue Jays team and what they need to do to really get over the hump and bring a World Series back to Toronto.
You know what? I like this team. I know there's been, people get frustrated with him, but my thinking is because what I've experienced, Seattle made that great run just to get close, right? If you get on one of those 10 out of 11 out of 14 games, you gotta take over the lead, man. I mean, you gotta because you're not going to maintain that. It's too hard to do that in the big league. So anyway, to answer your question, they got too good a team, right? I think they got the best pitching in the league in the starting rotation and in the bullpen. They're just deep, and that's going to benefit them in the long run. They're a good defensive club. The big question is, well, the offense, has been kind of hit or miss, right? Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but you got to remember, I think they're really good at. I think they got a good idea how to manufacture when the time comes when they need to do that, and that's going to benefit you in the playoffs because you're facing the best pitchers. Everybody's not going to hit home runs, but I think that really the only thing that's kept them from really just exploding is at times the lack of power that everybody expected. They're hitting their home runs, but I think primarily you hit Vladdy Jr. You set those bars, man, high. You almost won the MVP. Him and Ohtani. Everybody expects that every year, but it's not that easy. But he's still driving in runs, and but I picked them in Atlanta at the beginning of the year to play in the World Series, and they can still do that. All you got to do is get in, right? And I understand where they're at, and Boston doesn't have a team to catch them. No way. The Yankees don't know. I mean, this isn't a Boston type team, because they don't have enough pitching, and they don't have any star power, which sometimes you need up there, So they just got to hold off Seattle. I'm not so sure the Rays, with what happened to their shortstop, if that comes out in a bad way, it was like it sounds what that does to that team either. I mean, he was a big part of it. They could implode and come back to the pack. And the Blue Jays still have some games. I wouldn't write that off. Of course, Houston and Texas are pretty good. They're going to be going back and forth, but anything could happen. But I think they're too good not to get in. And once they get in, that they got the pitching to do it. And you know what? They got some seasoned guys on that team now with Springer leading the way. They've been there. It didn't end the way they wanted to last year, but they got playoff experience. They got a lot of good things going in, but I think everybody thought, well, this is a team's guaranteed to make the World Series. Well, it's never that easy. And so but the bottom line is just get in, and they've been in that position to do that most of the year.
John, this was an absolute pleasure. We thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you around Toronto sometime soon.
Hey man, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad we got together to do this and talk a little baseball and reminisce about a great country up there, the Great White North.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it.
All right, boys. Anytime, man.
That was a lot of fun, Jackson.
Yeah, that was amazing. You can see why he's such a highly regarded person in Canadian baseball lore. Obviously, his time with the Jays, but he's just a really down-to-earth person. For me, Matt, one thing that stuck out is just how much of a fan of the game he is still. You hear from some managers, some guys who've been in the game for a long time, they're off doing other things, enjoying life, just enjoying retirement, whatever it is. And he stayed around the game. I think it's really cool. And he's talking about all the different catchers and the one knee thing. I thought that was really cool to hear from him.
Yeah, I think the one knee thing might spark a debate, but
yeah.
And like you said, just so genuine, and he's exactly like you think he would be when you're watching him on TV managing, and you hear him talking about his guys. He talks about Anthopoulos, Beeston, he talks about Donaldson and Bautista. That you can really tell that he's a player's manager. But I found it very interesting when I asked him about that Russell Martin throwing the ball off Shin-Soo Choo's bat there, what he was thinking, and that I didn't know what was going on, and he said he didn't know what was going on either. And then the whole thing that led up to the bat flip and the craziness of all that, and being in the dugout and hearing the fans go crazy. So it was great to have a firsthand account of that.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Especially obviously if you're a Jays fan, especially if you were watching the team around that time, pretty cool to know that he was on the same page as you at home.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, just such a genuine guy, and we really appreciate his time. Until next time, though, we'll have some more exciting guests coming up. So stay tuned with us. But until then, take care.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out Canadian Baseball Network for extensive and comprehensive coverage of the latest in Canadian baseball. And The Baseball Zone, Canada's leading instructional baseball academy and training home to thousands of MLB pro, college, and youth baseball players.